Baruchim Abba B'Shem Hashem. Shem Egan Shirter, like to welcome everyone to today's shir from Rabbi Yakov Smith Shlita and Dine Bris Milah Shachal B'Shabbos Kodesh, the Shabbos Bris. So the great Chus is sponsoring a shir. Call Egan Shirter 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshivanet.com. Rav Smith.
Someone had a baby born with Shabbos Bris, and he had a few questions. You know, he's not used to having a Shabbos Bris. First, we want to know that some have the minhag that they put the milah, the milah knife, which I know is muktzah, they put it in the baby's crib or under the baby's head and the mattress, whatever it is the minhag is. And he wants to know that when you have a Shabbos Bris, is that mutter to do? After all, it's muktzah. Is it enough of a reason to be doicha Shabbos, the muktzah of Shabbos? Someone had a shaila about handing. The minhag is to hand the mohel, the milah knife, so make him a shliach. That mutter on Shabbos. But a really interesting shaila, the Aviyah Ben wanted to make the חיתוך. He wanted to do the first part of the milah and have a mohel take over on the second part. That's the pריעה, which needs more skill. And he was thinking to do it even though it's Shabbos. But someone said, why? Why should you have two people mechalel Shabbos? You could do it with the mohel and only one's mechalel Shabbos. And these and many other questions I'd like to discuss today. As you notice, the common denominator is not questions of how the mohel does his job. The mohel are doing very well, they're very qualified, they know what they're doing. The question is for the rest of us, how do we look at a Shabbos milah regarding all the various shailas? So the emes is that I should mention when a person's to have a baby on Shabbos, the Chazal tell us the child has here a shemayim, and I've seen this in my own experience. So it's definitely a schus. Also, a Shabbos Bris has a certain element of shmira to it. Because don't forget, the minhag, the Yisrael is to have a vachnacht, not to have a suda, but to have the children saying Krishma, the father staying up. I should mention, Rabbi Yakov Kamretzky told my shverim that he thinks the reason why Americana children don't grow up as good as the European is because the fathers stop making the all-night vachnacht. So Madaf Lenin, the father the night before the bris should stay up learning, and the children say Krishma. Yet some feel on Shabbos, if you have a Shabbos Bris, there's no reason for the vachnacht on Leil Shabbos, because Chazal tell us that Shabbos is Shomer. We don't say Hashem Am Yisrael Lo'ad, we say Apar Yasuka Sholem. Obviously the Shabbos is a Shmira. Now regarding that, I should mention that many Paiskim say, what's the stira? You stay up and learn, the children say Krishma, you don't have to have a Suda. Anyhow, you have a Shalom Zacha typically. So that question, that's a different Tolim and Hagim. Also, I should mention regarding the Shalom Zacha that takes place on the Shabbos before the Bris, the Pri Megadim writes Beferish, and he writes it in pretty long, usually he's very Makatza, but in Taf Mem Dalid, Sif Katan Tes Mishpatav, the Pri Megadim says that if you have a Shabbos Bris, and you could make the Shalom Zacha the night when the child was born, in other words, the first Shabbos, that's better. Because why do you make a Shalom Zacha? Because the child was saved, Nimlat HaBen, so it's sort of like a Suda Seidah. No, when is it more noticeable, the Hatzalah of a child? The first Leil Shabbos. But Lamaisa, it's not done. I think it's practical. It's come out impossible that the baby's born on Shabbos. The father's in the hospital typically with the Yoledes and the baby. How's he going to make a Shalom Zacha? So typically I think it's done the second Shabbos. But one thing we could say that there's definitely milah in the Shabbos Bris. The question is, how do you deal with all of our shailas? So I think that Lamaisa, we could pose a simple question that will give us enough information of the whole shir. We know regarding when a person has mechalel Shabbos for a choila, sheyesh bei sakana, there's a whole sugya, a whole machloikis, actually tanoim, if Shabbos is hutra, if Shabbos is hutra eitz b'kucha nefesh, or it's hutcha. In other words, either it's like there's no Shabbos, or hutcha means it's suspended. The nafkamina is, do you have to avoid doing what's not necessary? If Shabbos is hutra, you could do whatever's, even if it's not necessary, as long as it's related to the chayla. If it's hutcha, you have to be more careful. The question is, how do we look at a Shabbos bris? Do we say that during the bris, as if Shabbos is suspended, no Shabbos? Then the chayra, you could put the Ismail Shamila next to the baby. Then you could have two people involved with the milah. Or maybe it's only hutcha. It's only what's necessary. So Lamaisa, this is sugya for itself. But one thing I will tell you, that in every milah, there are at least 3 isurei Torah involved. Of course, the actual חיתוך caused the baby to bleed. That's the is of choivel. Some say it's also is of goizes, cutting off a piece of a skin, cutting off a piece of the actual of a person is an is of goizes. Some call it makah b'patish. After all, you're making from an oral into a mohel, a very big difference. And it's a malacha hatzricha legufa, don't forget. It's not just he's making a destruction, adrabah. He's making it very constructive. So there's definitely a lot of chilul Shabbos involved. But the pashtus, according to many Rishonim, that milah, like pekuach nefesh, we look at it like hutra. Toisvis in Masechta Shabbos Kuf Lamed Amud Beis, the Maschah Shaloi B'Rotzain Chachamim seems to say that milah is different. Milah is only hutcha. It's only mutter what's necessary. And Lamaisa, the Poskim say this clearly, that even if you hold milah is hutra, but I would say, put it bluntly, it might be hutra, but it's not hufkar. And the biggest raya is halacha that all agree, it's a Mishnah Masechta Shabbos, it's in Archaim Shin Lamed Aleph Vav and Yeridei Reish Samach Vav Yud Beis, that even though milah is doicha Shabbos, but it's only for the actual mitzvah itself. Machshirei milah are not doicha Shabbos. What that means is very simple. The Poskim say, let's say if the mohel did his homework, he did everything right, Erev Shabbos, he brought the sakin shel milah, we call it the Ismail, he brought it to the baby's house, he put it in a safe place. He comes Shabbos morning, he can't find it. Nella, he looks, he's frantic, he cannot find the Ismail shel milah. Maybe someone took it, maybe someone stole it. Lamaisa, he's living in a little derfel, there's no other Ismail shel milah. Shabbos morning, he's ready, the baby's healthy, he's ready, there's no milah knife. Zok the Mishnah, and that's the Rav says this as clear as can be in Shin Lamed Aleph Siv Zayin, that even though it's an einus, he did everything before Shabbos, but a yid cannot carry, even in a small derflach, which are only karmelos d'Rabbanan, and better push off the milah to Sunday. But a yid's not machal Shabbos for mechshirei milah, because getting the knife is not the mitzvah milah, it's machshireh. As the Aruch HaShulchan explains in Reish Samach Vav Siv Zayin, he says, true, milah is a great mitzvah, it's associated with the Is of Kores, but Chazal wanted to keep a control on Shabbos, K'dei shizaru b'nei Yisrael b'chil Shabbosos. So look at the extent how you have to be careful with Shabbos. It's better push off a milah than a mohel doing this at the Rabbanan. Now, Lamaisa, the Aruch HaShulchan says even more. In the end of Siman Reish Samach Vav, he says, even though milah might be hutra b'Shabbos, kolma the metzina l'meute b'chil al odif. In other words, it's really not so nageya lamaisa whether it's hutra or hutcha. You have to try to minimize chil Shabbos as much as possible. So we have Bez Hashem milah b'zmana, as we know, is a mitzvah. It's not an aveira. If it's shach to mimayid in chil Shabbos, that's better. Machshirei milah are not doicha Shabbos, and most important, Shabbos, even if it's hutra, it's not hufka. Now let's talk tachlis. As we should know, there are 2 parts of the ma'isa milah. What we call the milah, actually the חיתוך, and that's cutting off the foreskin. That's the mohel uses a special ismail, a special knife. And then I would say the word finishing touches, but it's not really accurate. Then he cuts off another part of the skin, and also whatever's left, that he uses his tiparin, his sharp fingernail, and that's typically referred to as the pria. There's the חיתוך and the pria. Now the pria is not finishing touches, because Chazal tell us, mol v'lei para ki'ilu lei mol. So it's more than just finishing touches, it's part 2 of the milah. Now typically, most moyelim in most situations do both. He does the חיתוך, and then he starts with the pria. But there are times that you have 2 uncles or chashva people, and you're machabed one with the milah and one with the pria. Or more commonly, if the father realizes that halacha, the chiv is on the father to make the milah. Don't forget, the mohel is a shliach of the father, but the real chiv is on the father. So he wants to do the חיתוך himself. Now the truth is, if he has a certain skill, it's not that hard. The mohel makes it in a way that he can't cut too much. He puts on a tvangel, a clamp, that he shouldn't go too far. So, but Lamaisa, we do have it, that Lamaisa, the father wants to do it. I would say, mitzvah yosem mishluchai is fine, but habachmanis on your child. Make sure you know what you're doing. And I know, Rav told me he once saw a father did the milah. After the milah, the Rav said, I could tell you, the child was not come out. The father didn't know what he's doing. So you have to make sure you know what you're doing. But here we have two eichatemtzes that you would like to have one, either mechaber, two people, two moyelim, two uncles, milah and pria, or the father does the milah and the mohel does the pria. Now I'll ask you a question, very, very intriguing. Is this mutter on Shabbos to have one mohel and one pariah? So you're wondering, why not? Both are mitzvah. Both of them are doicha Shabbos. So mitzad echad will say, what's the problem? In fact, some want to suggest, if you have two people as a milah, because then each one is doing half the issa. So it's like shnayim shaso. But then again, that doesn't make sense. Each one is doing a full chilul Shabbos. Why is that shnayim shaso? Maybe we'll say, fakert. If one person can be chilul Shabbos, why get two involved? Plus, we could also say, if one mohel is gonna do the milah, he's not doing a mitzvah yet, because mohel perfectly mo. So how could you mechal Shabbos if it's not even a ma'aseh mitzvah? A regular milah, he does a full ma'aseh mitzvah at the end of the day. Here he's doing half of it, and this is the taina of the Amshel Shloim and Yevamos Ches Gimel. He says to break it up, each one's doing a half a mitzvah. What's the justification? So it's interesting. You can hear both stadim, because the ma'aseh, when the mohel does half the ma'aseh milah, it's a full it's a mitzvah. When the second one does the pria, it's a mitzvah. You're not adding chilul Shabbos. I'll give you l'sabres ha'oizen. Imagine, I'm just making it, of course, it's a mashal. Imagine in chilul Shabbos, in a milah on Shabbos, you need a pound of malacha. Right? I'm just quantifying it. So when I do the whole thing, I do the full pound, and I get a mitzvah. If two people do it, how much do they do of malacha on Shabbos? The same pound. No one's doing extra malacha. So instead of I doing a pound of malacha, two people doing half a pound. Where's the more chilul Shabbos? Maybe it's totally in hutra versus hutcha. Zok the Shagisari and Simon Nuntes, if we hold milas hutcha, so who said you have right to have two moyelim getting involved in doing it? But here's the catch. Even if Shabbos is hutcha eitzel milah, but what's the problem? You're not doing more chilul Shabbos. And this is why many poskim say, the Shulchan in the end of Reish Samach Vav, B'yameinu le'shamanu mishamak b'alzeh. Now don't forget, this is the same Shulchan in the same Reish Samach Vav, who says b'feirish, even though milah is hutra, don't do more than you need. Be careful. And he himself says you could divide it. You know what the svara is? Very pashut. There are two parts of milah. Either I will do the milah and the pria, or I'll do the milah and you'll do the pria. Where is the increase in chilul Shabbos? So it's something very interesting that we can look at it, we can say, what's the problem? Now after we feel very comfortable to say, it's mutta, shamanu, to be machmir, it's the same ma'aseh chilul Shabbos, comes again the Mechaba, in the end of Reish Samach Vav, he quotes from a source in the Gemara, that you should not have leshli zohar, don't divide the ma'aseh milah into two. L'maaseh, the Ramah, in Taka on that Mechaba, he says, what's the problem? And he quotes from a Sefer Trumas, which we don't have, but the Rashba in Chelik Zayin Tov Kuf Lamed Vav writes befeirish that the minig is one could be mohel and one could be pariah, and there's no problem. In Darkei Moshe, he says it again, but then he adds, since the Mechab is machmir, toiv lahachmel lechatchila, to keep it to one mohel and that's it. Lemaisa, the Lavush, Taz, Shach, Noid, Vihuda, Chachbazad, Marachashulchan, the Munkach and Ois Chaim V'Shalom, all say, we stay with the Ramah, and it's Mut L'Chatchila. Now, after all this, the Noid Vihuda, Ukayadua, was a mohel. In Tanyana, Archaim Simon Chav Beis, the Chsam Soifa, Kaidu was also a mohel. In Chelik Vav Simon Sadik Tes, they both write the same thing. Even though in Mitzad Din you could have two people involved, the Chsam Soifa's lashon is Shoymei Nafsha Yerchak Mizeh. So it seems when it comes to Lamaisa, the Poskim are skeptical. But one thing I will say, that the Kozhiglava in a Tshuva Eretz Tzvi Simon Samach Gimel, he says if the Aviyah Ben wants to do the milah and he can't do the Pria, so he has to get someone else, that is more of a tzad to be makel. Because he wants to do his Ma'isa Mitzvah, let him do it. He can't do the rest of it, get someone else. So Lamaisa, I did see that all agree Shabbos is not hufka. To have two moyalim, it seems that the minig is not to do it, even though there are mos mekel mikradin, but at the ends in Darkei Moshe, it's kedai to be machmir. When the father wants to do it, there's much more sympathy to allow him to do it. That is part one. Part two is a group of questions, legeya to the actual Ismail Shal Milah, the knife of the Milah. A little background I would like to tell you, and that's the Mechaber in Shin Ches Sif Aleph, says there are certain types of muktzah, machmas chasar and kiss, that even l'tzoyrech gufay mekayma, you can't move it. What's the Mechaber's example? Sif Aleph Hilchas Muktzah, Ismail Shal Milah. What's pshat? Ismail Shal Milah, l'chayra should be a regular klisha malachta le'issa. You use it to cut babies. But l'maisa, it's even better than that. Cutting babies on Shabbos, not cutting babies. It's the heilige mitzvah of milah. So maybe it's malachta leheta. But it's not negeya. You know why? Because l'maisa, the Ismail Shal Milah, you're very makbid not to use it for anything but the milah. Let's say you have a milah, Parash Shabbos, Parashas Boy. So even on Shabbos, Parashas Boy, you're not going to give it to the Aviyah Ben to cut up the cantaloupes for the Shalom Zacha. You are makbid to only use it for milah. And that's why the first sif in Hilchas Muktzah, the Mechaber says the Ismail Shal Milah is considered Muktzah, Machmas, Chazar, and Kiss. And you can't move it, even Litzayah, Gufa, Mekaymer. You'll be a lamdin, and you'll say, I figured it all out. I'm not going to touch the Ismail Shal Milah. I'm going to put it in a little pouch or a little satchel, whatever you keep it in, and I'll pick it up holding the bag. But that's wrong. Because if you have that bag or satchel or whatever it is, that pouch, to hold the Ismail Shal Milah, so that pouch is a basis. And Taka, the Kive'egan Tshuva in the Simon Chav Beis, he talks about our shaila about the muktzah status of the milah knife. He says it won't help putting it in a pouch, because that becomes a basis for the muktzah. So here we have to figure out, if you can't move it before or after the milah, because it's muktzah, machzor, and kiss, so what's the heter to move it during the milah? So it's not a big question, because the teretz might be simple. That lamaisa, if you're allowed to do malachas deraisa, of choivel and the geizes and tikkun mana, so you can't do a drabanan of muktzah, it's unthinkable. You'll say, but I'm picking up the milah knife is only machshiri milah, but that's not true. That's the way to do it. So lamaisa, if you're allowed to do multiple isurei Torah for the heilige mitzvah of milah, so what's so hard to understand? You're allowed to move the milah knife. It's muktzah, but it's part of the heta of doing milah on Shabbos. That's the simple approach. But maybe we'll suggest maybe a little more far-reaching heta. You're right, Parshas Va'era and Parshas B'Shalach, it's muktzah. Maybe since when Shabbos Parshas Boy comes and you're having a Shabbos milah and you have das, you know you must use the Ismail Shal Milah. Why can it be that on Shabbos Parshas Boy, when you have a Shabbos Bris, the milah knife is not muktzah? Just like you could take the ultimate muktzah, stones, eitzim, avonim, and meyacherit. We'll soon see you take off for Erev Shabbos to put the orla into the dirt. Dirt is muktzah, but achana helps. So why can it be that the muktzah, the milah knife on Shabbos Parshas Boy, when you have a bris milah, is not muktzah? Because you meyacherit. And that's taka very true. But the problem with that is, you're not going to use it to cut up cantaloupes. So it must be that even if you miyachid it, it doesn't work for the rest of Shabbos. So you know when it's mutam? For the Maisa Milah. After the Ma'aseh Milah, it goes back to Muktzah. Varaya, Friday night, you're not going to use it to cut up the melons. Shabbos afternoon, you're not going to let your children play with it. And that's probably why the Maril in the Menhagim, at page Taf Chav Vav in the new print, he says, Tekiv Acha HaMilah, Yasiru Miyadam, Kol Tzarchei Milah, Dechashuvim Muktzah. So the Maril seems to say, Tekiv, immediately after the mohel makes the חיתוך, put it down. And he says, Lav Dafka, I should mention once for all, Lav Dafka, the Ismail Shamila, any other keli that he has, that he's maksa, that's chsar and kiss. So Maril seems to be saying, right after the mitzvah of milah, it's all over. Put it down and don't move it. And the svara is, even though you're going to use it, you don't use it for anything but ma'aseh milah. However, Rabbi Yerucham was one of the Rishonim, and the Lashon is quoted in the Beis Yosef, in Reish Samach Vav. Magen Avraham Shin Lamed Aleph Hey also quotes it. Mutal taltel hasakin ul hachzirei la'acha milah. The mi'acha shetiltel hakli beheta machzirei le'eza makom sheyirtza. So it seems to be that it's a machlokes Maril, Rabbi Yerucham, if the milah knife after the milah is muktzah or not. The big nafkamin is, can you put it in a safe place or you have to put it down? Take it. Now Lamaisa Darkei Moshe in Yeridei Reish Samavav Aleph quotes the Maril, but then he says, I saw the Rabbi Yerucham, and therefore we have nothing to worry about. But if you notice, both the Maril, and this is important, both the Rabbi Yerucham, the Ramon Darkei Moshe, the Ramon Shulchan Aruch, Reish Samavav Beis, you're allowed to be metaltal the Ismail La'acha Milah, Latznioi, Bechotza HaMa'uriv, you're allowed to put it in a safe place. The Haloi Huktzah Ben Hashmashos. Ben Hashmashos, you knew you're having a Shabbos milah. And therefore, you could put it back wherever you want. So it seems that it's a machlokes if it's muktzah on Shabbos or not. The Maril said, take it, put it down. But what did the Rabbi Yerucham say? If you notice, he did not say once, the Ramah did not say once, do whatever you want with it the whole Shabbos. You're allowed to put it back in the right place. What's the pshat? So I think it's very pashut. Lemaisa, let's talk about Shabbos Parshas Bo. Friday night, you're looking forward to a beautiful bris the next morning. Will you play with the knife Friday night? Will you give your knife to the caterer to cut up the cantaloupes? Rather not. You said you're makzadas. You're not makzadas free for all. It's still chsar and kiss. You're makzadas, I'm going to use it for the ma'aseh milah. But here's my catch. The Maril held, it's a very limited heta. It's mutter to use the milah knife like it's mutter to cut the baby and chavola and tikkamona and muktzah. But once the milah is over, the mitzvah is over, put it down. The Rabbi Yerucham held that's illogical. You have das to use it for the ma'aseh milah. It does not mean that once you finish the milah, you have to drop it, because then it's going to get ruined and you vayt the chasar and kiss. You have das to use it for the entire ma'aseh milah, even the machshirim part of it, because it's practical. We'll soon see. You're careful your whole life to keep the milah knife protected, and you make a milah Shabbos Parshas Bo. What do you do with it? Drop it on the table with the blood on it, so the whole Shabbos is going to get all full of germs. Is that logical? So the Rabbi Yerucham held you have das to use it. Whatever you do on a regular weekday bris, you clean it up, you put it away. That's fine. To cut up melons, you don't do in a weekday bris either. So Shabbos is not different. So it's very logical to say that the Rabbi Yerucham and the Ramah held you allowed to do anything that's associated with the ma'aseh milah. The Maril was more machmir, and of course, but the fact that you will never use it for anything else indicates that taka, like the Rabbi Yerucham says, you can't stop move it. But whatever is needed for the actual bris would be mutter. So now we have a very good sat to be makel. After he finished after the mohel finishes the ma'aseh milah, he should not just drop it down, like Maril says, put it in a safe place. But there is a problem. If you're not a mohel, you might not realize this, but the mohel that knows what he's doing goes right from the חיתוך to the pri'a. If you know, it looks like a little of a rush, and he tries to do it right away. What's the pshat? Because after the חיתוך, understandably, it's going to start to bleed. Once it's bleeding heavily, it's very hard to make a Pria. You don't see what you're doing. But a skilled mohel will make the chitur and drop the knife down in haste because he wants to get it out of his hand. So his hands could then quickly start the Pria. And once he starts the Pria before the bleeding, he could do it efficiently. And it saves, of course, tzar for the baby. And of course, it makes it much easier to work with the actual makom of the milah. So he can't hold on to it and go and put it in the face on top of the brake front or hide it someplace. He can't do that. He doesn't have the time. See, if you have two people working, one does the milah and yashikoyach, next חיתוך, so the mohel has the option of first cleaning it off and then putting it away in a safe place. But the mohel, usually if it's only one mohel, he has to slam it down, push it to save time. So lemaisa, there are other tzadim to be makel. The Magen Avram in Shin Ches, in Shin Lamed Aleph Sif Cotton Hay, he sends us to a mechab in Shin Ches Gimel that's for us very familiar. We spoke about it a few weeks ago. You're allowed to use a hammer to crack a coconut, but what do you do with the hammer after you crack the coconut? You don't have to put it down right where you are. You're allowed to put it to Mekayma. You're allowed to take it and put it to the right place. That's the mechaba in Shin Ches Sif Gimel. Zok the Magen Avraham, the mohel, if he has the opportunity of doing this, let's say there's another one doing the Pria, when he finishes the חיתוך, let him go and put it in a safe place. You walked with muktzah unnecessarily, but oy de biyade is mutter from vachnacht le'issa, it's mutter for the izmel shel milah. Of course, the obvious question on that is that we only say oy de biyade is a heta by vachnacht le'issa, not by chasar and kiss. But evidently, the Magen Avram held that since the Maisa you are involved in a mitzvah, it's not muktzah for that time, you're allowed to put it back wherever you want. The Rabbi in Shin Lamed Aleph Sif Cotton Hay, he says, let's say the mohel is doing the Pria. He can't put it back on top of the brake front. He has to drop it right away. So he says a better eitz would be, give it to someone, and you have to point someone before, your associate or whatever, someone that you trust, stand right by the milah. As soon as I make the חיתוך, I'm going to give it to you in haste, so be careful, take it safely. And you, don't be a batlin, since now it's oid biyodoi beheta, you put it back in the safe place. Tell him where to put it. And the Rabbi seems to hold, as long as you didn't put it down, it's oid biyodoi. So the mohel gives it to his associate or his nephew, whatever it is, who's going to do the right thing and put it right where it belongs, and you avoid all issues. Now the Machzor Shekel says, wait a minute, where'd you get that license to give it to someone else to make it oid biyod of someone else? You have to drop it down, not put it in someone else's hand. But the Poskim explain, I guess we can understand it also, since this is part of the Ma'aseh Milah, he wants to give it to someone else, and that someone else will put it back in the right place, and Shalom al Yisrael. L'maisa, again, as I told you, the Machzor Shekel questions it, but both the Chachmas Adam, it's in the Yeridei Hilchos Milah, and the Mishnah Berurah, and we'll soon see Shin Yud, quote, your Rabbi, you could be soymech on this b'shas hatchak. So again, if you have two people doing the milah, one Pria, the mohel should make the חיתוך, and ba'oid b'yadei, put it back in the safe place. If you have one person doing it, so he can't do it, he has to give it to someone close to him who will be able to put it back in the right place. The Marshag, in a tshuva, in Chelik Bei Simen Pei Gimel, I'm sorry, and I must mention Kvar Kidmoy, Kivega, and the Tzumas Hadeshan we'll soon see, but he says he has another eitzah. The mohel should not put down the milah knife on the table. Put it on a tray or a little bag that has jewelry or something of value on the tray or in the bag. What's the pshat? Because even though, as we know, the leichta is muktzah on Shabbos because of the burning fire, and it makes the leichta tray and the table a basis, but if you put challah on the table before Shabbos and it's there bein hashmashos, so the table is a basis for heta and for issa, and you're allowed to move the table after the fire burns out. So the Marshag wants to create the same heta by a milah, to put it on the table, so now the table's a basis for the knife, and also the knife is muktzah. Why don't you put it into a bag, into a satchel, into a whatever it may be, a pouch, and put some jewelry in it, and then the bag is mutter. it's not a bus only for is, like we said earlier, like Rabbi Kiva says, it's a bus of het as well. And Taka, the same Rabbi Kiva and Simon Chabei says, if you put something of value into the bag, then it's a bus of het and issa, and you can move the Ismail Shamila away to a safe place, and Shalom al Yisrael. Now the Shmir Shabbos in Perik Chaf Ha'aron Gimel, he has a problem according to Shlomo Zalman, that even though you put some heta in a bag, but when you want to move the bag, you're supposed to be menayer the heta, the issa, because you don't want to move it if you could avoid it. So how does this eitzah help? So I saw the Shvus Yitzchak in Hilchas Muktzah Amud Kufn Vav says Rabbi Yashiv very strongly favored this eitzah, and he says that since the Maisa we have Paiskim that hold like as originally, like he said, for Beni Rucham, you're allowed to put it away after the milah l'chatchila. So in other words, it's really not muktzah after the milah. So with another sniff, an extra chumrah, you're good. So that's eitzah number 2. If you can't do the het of oida biyadai, put it in a keli that has a heta. You're moving het and issa, and that's fine. The Taz in Yeridei, Reish Samach Vav Sif Katan Aleph, and all these are mut independently. He wants to say a different sad lahakol, which if you're a mohel, you understand it. Chazal were very careful that a person does a mitzvah should not get, quote, burnt. Lamosh, you go to help someone, to save someone's life, you're allowed to come back, even though it's a bit out of the tchum. Soifoi mishum tchilosai, a person shouldn't lose from doing a mitzvah. Zok the Taz, if you're going to have an Ismail Shamila, you have to leave on the table, and it's going to end up getting lost, or broken, or stolen, so it becomes too of an expensive mitzvah to do. And you will have a policy, I don't do Shabbos Bris. And that's going to be problematic. So, Zokti, the Marshag, and the Zokti Taz, I should mention, and the Marshag in the same tshuva, so the same Yisoid. If you're not going to provide a heta for the mohel, he will be mimna v'loy, and he won't do the meal again. Give him the heta of putting it back in its place. So this is another heta. I should mention yet another heta, the Rav Pa'olim in Archaim Chele Gimel Simon Yud Ches. He says hoil ve'ishteri. So an egin chiddush, but he has a raya to it. Once you're allowed to do the ma'aseh milah, you're allowed to complete the ma'aseh milah. Again, not that you could play around with it. You're allowed to complete the ma'aseh milah, and that would be mutter because of that heta itself. Now, I think it's understood that it's not, again, hefgevelt, it's mutter whatever's needed for the ma'aseh milah. Now, let's say, in the worst scenario, the mohel put the knife down, there was no associate, and it's a while later, what do you do with the milah now that's lying around in an unsafe place? So that's pashut. The mechaber in Shin Ches, Sif Yud Ches, if you have a koitz hamunach b'shus harabim, a dangerous thorn, that someone might get hurt in it, so even though it's muktzah, you have to move it. So I saw the Sefer Orchos Shabbos points out that Chelik Beis Amud Nun Dalet, that having a milah knife lying around is dangerous. Mitzarechot, it's tempting for children, it's exciting, it's something new, but it's razor sharp, so you can't leave it around. Then you have no choice but to pick it up to prevent any dangerous situation. Now, after all this, oida biyadai, give to someone else, the bosses he said, Seif Mishum Tchilasai, the Taz in Reish Samach Vav in Yeridei Sif Katan Aleph, he says, but it's machloikis maril, and the Rabbeinu Yerucham, Eini kedai lahachriya bein haharim, but nearly mevura leisser. The Taz seems to go with the shita of the maril, that taketh after the meal you have to put it down. So after all that work, the Taz comes out l'chumra. How do we paskin? Again, if the Taz was skeptical to paskin bein haharim, what do we say? So Baruch Hashem, we have a Poisik Acher and the Chavetz Chaim. And the way the Chavetz Chaim did a masterful job, Kedarkoi, is stunning. In Shin Yud, Sif Katan Tezvav, he discusses milah on Shabbos, exactly what to do. So first he quotes the Taz, that Lamaisa, there's no heter to move the sakin after the milah, like the Maril. Take it, put it down. So then he adds that Lamaisa, it's Mukz Machsar and Kiss. And then he adds, even though you're going to use it for the milah, so it's not a chasar and kiss, yeah, but only for the milah. The whole protection is for the milah. So for the milah is fine, but what's the heter to move it further? Zok the Mishtabura, that Lamaisa, he quotes the Magen Avram, oida biyadei would be a heter. So if it's shaykh oida biyadei, he put it down, that's the preferable way to do it. But says the Mishnah Berurah, if the mohel is working by himself, there's not one mohel and one pariah, he can't put it in the right place. He has to quickly finish the milah. Then we'll rely on the heta of the El Yerabba, give it to someone else. If for some reason he said this wasn't shaykh, we go back to Ikad Din, like the Ramah, like the Shach, that holds that it's mutter to mitaltal until the mitzvah is completed. Because Ikad Din, again, we go with the Rabbi Yeruchim, the Ramah, that it's not a muktzah issue at all. So the Mishnah Berurah is taken noita to try to honor the Taza Shita, but once Lamaisa, if there's any type of problem, we could be saimach on all of our kulas. Now, by the way, as the Pais can point out, this is lav dafka, the Izmil Shal Milah. Any kli, any instrument that's used during the meal, that's chsar and kiss, should be the same halacha. Now let's apply this to the shalat we began with. There's a minig, it's a skula, to put the milah knife either under the baby's mattress or near the baby's head, whatever the minig is, but somehow the shmira of the knife being in the baby's vicinity is a shmira for the next morning's milah. The question is that mutter to do Friday night? Don't forget, it's before the milah. There's no hoil v'ishteri, there's no seif shem tchilasai. It's a skula. So maybe a bigger school than putting a knife down would be to keep Shabbos. So Lamaisa, there's a sefer, the Shabbos Bris, that's from aliyos Paisik, one of the earlier Paisik on milah. He says, what's the heta to do a skula? A skula is very nice, but not at the expense of Chilul Shabbos. And we can understand that. Lamaisa, you wouldn't give it Friday night for someone to cut up a cantaloupe. So who said for a school is mutter? Lamaisa, as we say, if you understand, like we explained earlier, the svar of the Ramah is that it's not mutter the entire Shabbos. That's unthinkable. It's ma'isi's makbid. It's mutter to do whatever you do by regular bris. You cut the arl off, you wash it, you put it away. So if on a regular Tuesday morning bris, you give the milah knife to the avia ben to put it next to the baby, so you're not makbid for that. So why can it be that the Ma'isa Milah begins Friday night? And I think that's why Avaz and Chelik Dal, Kuflam and Hey, he says, if that's the Minig Yisrael to do it, and that's done, and I guess you're not makbid to give away the Milah knife, so it's back to the same Yisoid, that the Milah on Shabbos is mutter to do, and there's no concern of muktzah, whatever is done, typically by a bris. So for those that do want to put it down, you have Ravazan to be Saimachan. The best eitzah to avoid childless, to have the real school of Shabbos, is erev Shabbos, right before the Zman. You can put down the milah knife. Some moyelim have a better service. They have an old Izmil Shal Milah that they give out and put it by the baby's head. They don't want to give out b'chal. Maybe tataka armak, put on the real Izmil Shal Milah. So if you could do that, that's a better idea. But what's interesting to me, someone told me, and I found in a sefer, that what's the minig of putting the Izmil Shal Milah in the baby's crib or under the baby's mattress? Why is that done? So he says the earlier place can say, because when there's a Shabbos bris, we want to make sure that everything is ready for the bris. So you put the Izmil Shal Milah in the baby's crib, it's there waiting. You don't have to go tomorrow, where are you going to find it? You're going to call a guy to carry it. So the whole Izmil, the whole minig is Al Shmira Shabbos. So it's somewhat, counterproductive to get involved with a question. Now, Lamaisa, as far as the Avi Ben handing the milah knife to the mohel, now why is this done? Because Lamaisa, the mitzvah, the chiv is on the Avi Ben, but he's not qualified. So he wants to make the mohel a shliach. So by telling him be a shliach, they feel it's not enough. He also gives the milah knife picks it up, gives it to the mohel, who right away starts the milah. So that's more involvement by the father. So again, if you go strictly with halacha, says the sefer Shabbos Bris in Reish Samaches, if you cut nun hey, but lamaisa it's not part of the milah. It's a frumkeit, okay? Who said it justifies the father picking up a milah knife? That's really muktzah. But again, as we said, there's a tzad to be makel. I understand why. That if lamaisa, this is step one of the milah making a shliach. Number two, and that's where Rabbi Yasha was matter for a different reason, it's part of the mohel has to pick it up. So what's the difference if he picks it up or you pick him and give it to him? It's getting the milah on the way. So the Maisa Paiskim are much more sympathetic that if the mohel, the Avia Ben wants to do it, he could be makel. But again, if he just wants to be extra from, he could appoint the mohel shliach with his words and not touch the knife. So here we could say there are definitely minhagim that allow the father to give it. If someone wants to be more careful, let him just tell the mohel, I'm making you a shliach, please pick it up on my behalf. What's interesting, which is an unavoidable issue, is after the milah was done, and assuming whether he has 2 mohelim or 1, it's irrelevant. Is there a heta to wash the milah knife from the blood on top of the milah knife? Picking up the knife is muktzah. Now the milah is all over. It was a wonderful milah, but it's all over. So to us it would seem simple, but the Yavitz in his Pirish in the Siddur, when he has about the Hilchas Milah, nirali she'asla kanchai min adam, you're not allowed to wash it off because of the issa of muktzah. And the Levushay Srad Yeridei Reish Samach Vav Sif Cotton Bays quotes his lalach. In other words, this is already way after the Ma'aser Milah. This is Milah, this is Piri'a, it's done. Comes again the Mabit in Chayla Gimel Sim and Pei Tes, and the Magen Avram quotes part of his Lashon in Orach Chaim, Shin Lamnaf, like I told you earlier, and he wants to say the following. He says, the problem with washing the milah knife is not so much the muktzah. And it seems he is inferring that since that's part of the Ma'aser Milah, no mohel leaves a blood-stained milah knife till after Shabbos, it gets ruined. So the problem is not so much the muktzah, the problem is the achana. If you have a second milah on Shabbos, so you have to wash it, you have to sterilize, you have to make it very clean. But if there's no milah anything after Shabbos, so why are you being meichem mi Shabbos to chayil? So the Mabit's problem seems to be a problem of achana. However, for us, that we understand that the washing is part of the, quote, the Ma'aser Milah, and you can't leave it like that, and that's why there's no problem of muktzah, so there's also no problem of achana. We mentioned this many times, the Marshag in Chelik Alf, is a brilliant yisoid. He said, let's say you left your weekday jacket outside in the air, but outside, and it's about to rain. And Lamaisa, you will not wear your weekday, you go on Shabbos, we have Bekasha. You're not going to wear a weekday jacket. Can you bring it in from the rain so it shouldn't get ruined into the house? Well, what's the shayla, right? It's not haitzah, there's an eiruv. The only problem is hachana. You're not wearing the jacket b'shemayim until after Shabbos. But the halacha is, klish v'lachtel is, you're allowed to move it, l'tzorech gufay. Klish v'lachtel is, you're allowed to move it, micham l'tzeil, I mean. A malachti leheta, you're allowed to move micham l'tzeil. Ayachana. So the Marshag, achana is only when you do something you're supposed to do a Matzoi Shabbos, but you want to save time, so you do it on Shabbos. For example, washing dishes that you don't need, making a bed that you don't need. But if the time is now or never, if you don't bring in the jacket, it's going to get ruined in the rain. It's not achana. That's the time to do it. If you don't wash the milah knife now, it's going to get rusty. So it's not that you're trying to save time. You're trying to save the keli. So it would be like a klisha in the same heta, like a micham l'tzeil of a malach lahet. And taka the Minchas Alaz and Ois Chayim Reish Samachvav Sikot and Beis was also a mohel. He says kashem ha'oid lizar b'zeh. How could you tell a mohel leave the knife blood stained the whole Shabbos? He says yodua. He writes even the word rust Reish Aleph Samach Tes, which is dangerous for the baby. And he says another thing also, if you tell him he can't wash the milah knife on Shabbos, he won't make it a milah Shabbos. Wait till Sunday. I'm not doing it.
Stainless steel, it doesn't run.
Okay, I don't know. I'm just telling you what the Kenzai. But I'll tell you something interesting in a moment. But the Maisa, the Minchas Alaz's taina is that the Maisa, it's done. It has to be. You have to allow the mohel to do it. Now, the Maisa, the Aruch HaShulchan in Reish Samachvav Sif Tesvav. Some asa rinsing off the milah knife, v'lo na'iginan came, when anoya came, and he says, be'emes it's muta, the ma'isa, he says, because that's the tzarech of the milah. So again, I think the main heta is that that's part of the ma'isa milah. You have das to use it. You have no das to cut up cantaloupe. Part of using is normal use. In fact, that's part of the chesar and kiss. Don't leave the milah knife to accumulate the staining. Now, Lamaisa, like you said, it's an interesting point. If it doesn't get ruined, what's the problem today? But again, many Muslims have said, Pasha, it's just a feeling. They're afraid, they don't know what's going to be. You might get it in germs or whatever it is. So, Lamaisa, I could say that I asked around, it seems the Mayalim do rinse it off. The Minchas Alaz, again, was that qualified mohel, and he said that's not the minik. What I never knew, I guess I learned the sugya, that they have today, moyelim have, someone in Muncie designed it, a disposable milah knife. Now, where did that come up? Why is that done? Because when you do a milah in the hospital, and this time Moyel Fisher from Muncie, who does many milahs in adults and hospitals, and you have to sterilize everything before you use anything in a hospital. And the way he explained it is that if you sterilize it, the intense heat, it ruins the milah knife. Push it. So he thought of a simple eitzah, brilliant but simple eitzah. It's basically a razor, like a razor, regular razor. It's on a inexpensive metal, and basically you do one milah and you throw away the razor. So it's inexpensive and definitely satisfies the hospital's needs, because this you don't have to sterilize it, it's new. So the question is, believe it or not, let's say you have this, let's say the mohel, and let's say he's making a milah on Shabbos, and he has an izmir shel milah, one of these disposable. Is it also muktzah? So mitzarecha, the razor, of course, again, very inexpensive. The keli is also inexpensive. But l'maisa, you don't use it to cut up cantaloupe. So the muchid machzor and kiss is not because it's a tremendous amount of money that it's at value. It's you miyachid it, you makzadas, you don't want to use it. So what's the difference, how much it's worth? If you don't let people play with it, it's chasar and kiss. But the milah is, after the milah is done, you have no, then taka, you have no problem of muktzah, because you throw it in the garbage. So basically, you avoid the muktzah on the end, but in the first part of it, the muktzah, it is still a problem of muktzah. Another question that people ask, and the Shabbos Bris, of course, about bringing the baby to shul in a place where there's no eiruv. Of course, having a yid can't carry a child to the milah, that you can't do an issa d'rabbanan even for machshirei milah. What's the shaila? The shaila is to have a guy carry the baby. In other words, for a yid to do it, we saw the beferish, the Rav Shechnach, better push off the milah and carrying even issa d'rabbanan. But the question is to employ a guy. So l'maisa, some people find it's very distasteful having a guy be the first kfata, walks into shul proudly carrying a baby. It's inappropriate, especially if sometimes the guy doesn't think and drives has someone drive him to shul, so gets out of a car, walks into a shul. We're talking about halacha without those issues. So pashtis, tainit the Magen Avraham, shin aleph sif kat and hey, why can you do it at home? Roiv hadras melech, that's a milah. But who said Roiv hadras melech is daicha, having a guy do malacha? The Noid Behuda in Archaim Simel Amid Gimel bemoans the fact that people, listen to this, would have a goy light neiros on Nila Yom Kippur when all the neiros burnt out. It's pitch black and you don't know the piyutim by heart. Better don't say piyutim on Nila Yom Kippur, but don't be machal Shabbos with the guy. Now, of course, there is a deraisa, here's the Rabbanan, but the sensitivity Magen Avraham had that who said it's chutra to have a guy do malacha to make Rav Hadras Melech. The Chasam Sofer, Kuf Nun Tes, and the Mishnah Berurah in Shalom and Aleph, the Aruch HaShulchan in Shalom and Aleph, all go with that shita that there's no heta, even if the guy carries in a carmelis, which is a shvus to shvus, is asa. I should have mentioned this earlier. The only shaila is that when it's out of big city, when it's only a shvus to rabbanan, so the guy is doing a shvus to shvus, and even that the person say, what's the heta? Do it at home. However, the Rav Kayidu in Shin Lamed Aleph Siv Ches is Mekel, and the Rav holds that since there is a quality of a bris, B'Rav Hadras Melech, you could have a guy only in a place not Stam Deraisa. So if you live in a big city, this heta will not work. Now, some add other svaras why it should be Mutai Di'akum, the Tircha de Tzibura, of having the Tziba schlepped to the house where the baby is being held. I saw a nice svara, maybe al tznius, because in shul you have a vayba shul, upstairs, downstairs. In a house, typically, unless it's done well, it ends up being teruvais. So lamaisa, we're not getting into the achra. Again, the Magen Avraham is Bura Machmir, and that's typically the minig b'nei yeshivas. Many chassidim go with the Rav, but I would mention that if you have a guy taka bringing the baby in, so you feel a little mud in the guy walks in with the baby, you don't want it to be a kvata. So you run over, and as the guy's walking in, you take the babies out of the guy's hand. That's a Mishnah in Shabbos Daf Beis. Because if the guy was still walking, did not make an anocha, did not stop walking or put the baby down, by Yid taking out the baby, zok the machsa shekel, the Yid is doing Chilul Shabbos. So that's hardly a hiddur in milah to a Yid do Chilul Shabbos. So also, God, he adds, when you're in the house, don't pick up the baby and put it into the guy's hand as the guy's walking out, because that's making the akira. So if you do it, you have to do it right. You have to make sure you know what you're doing. It shouldn't be a Rosh Hashanah D'Oraisa city. It shouldn't be Chilul Shabbos. And if you do it at home, I would mention Taka, make a point making it ba'oifen. That's Snith. You shouldn't come to Taruvais. So then if you do it at home, you don't have the chesaron that someone's concerned about. Another interesting question that the poskim discuss is there's a minig, it has a makar halacha to have neiros burning by the milah and by the suda. Is there heter to call a guy to light neiros on Shabbos? The answer is chas v'shalom. Because lighting neiros is a deraisa. It's not like carrying in a carmel, it's a deraisa. And there's no heter for a minig to a guy do malacha deraisa. We saw the Rabbi Yehuda even on Nila by Yom Kippur. So the eights, like everything else in Yiddishkeit, chacham eina b'roishai. Erev Shabbos, you buy a yahrzeit licht, or two of them, or you want to buy the more Hamish-looking, thin, tall candles that you burn for a few days and light that Erev Shabbos, but not Chalil to Mechalel Shabbos. And a fascinating question is the orla, the skin, the foreskin after the milah. So the Maisa, in your day, Reish Samachay Sif Yud, the Mechaber says the minig is to put the orla into Afar, and that's a skula for the child. So a mahapach the orla also. But anyhow, Shabbos, we have two problems with muktzah. First of all, Afar is muktzah. So that's easy to remedy. You go before Erev Shabbos, the backyard, take out the Afar, and be miyachid, I'm using it, la'oilam, this is going to be for the orla, and it's no problem. The problem is with the orla. The orla chayr is muktzah. So, if oid biyada, you put it, you right into the Afar, fine. But as I told you, very often, the mohel doing all of it together, and he can't go and put it if it's not mamish within hand's reach. So let's say he put it down. Now I have an oil on the table. What do you do now? So this was asked the night Behuda Tinyana Yardei Sim and Kuf Samach Beis, a beautiful tshuva. And he says they were alumnim that said you can't move the arla once he put it down. So Night Behuda says a brilliant yisoid. And he says that part of the Maisa mitzvah, and he proves this from Tanoim, it goes all to Tanoim, part of the Maisa mitzvah is putting it in Afar. So just like the Orla B'Shas, the actual Chitok is not Muktzah, because it's a Chefta Shal Mitzvah, it's a Mitzvah, it's like a Miyachid L'Shem Mitzvah, the Mitzvah only ended when you put it into the Afar. So, even though you put it down, if you didn't complete the Maisa Mitzvah, the Orla is still a Malachti Laheta. And you're allowed to pick it up and put it into the Afar. And then he says, which I enjoyed very much, he says, and Lamaisa, the Marshal says, once the orla is in a keli, then the keli and the orla become muktzah. Why? I thought it's a cheftzah mitzvah. There's only a cheftzah mitzvah when you have to complete the mitzvah by putting it into the offer. Once it's there, so the offer becomes a basis to the orla, and that would have to be muktzah. So he says, even though the Ismail Shamila has a milah over the orla, don't forget, Ismail Shamila, the end of the day, is a keli. But the afar, the end of the day, is machas gufay. It's only a mutta if it's some type of mitzvah is being performed. So therefore he says that lamaisa, the orla, is kulei muktzah, once in the earth, keep it as it is. Now, our question is still not settled, because lamaisa, if you have the orla that is right there, it's not pleasant. So poskim say, could be, if it's taken a place that people find it unpleasant, then graf shorei, you can move the orla with the offer, it's a heta of graf shorei. The Minchas Alaza in Ois Chayim, Reish HaMachvav Gimel, who was a mohel, and he says even more than that. He says that when you have one mohel and is doing both, they can't put it in the offer. All agree that there's no problem of picking up the orla, putting it down, and after picking it up, because that's part of the Maisa Mitzvah. And he says even those that were machmir was only if you have a mohel and then a pariah. Then ideally do it right, put the orla right into the offer. So Lamaisi, the end of the day, I did see Rav Vozna takes a step further. In Chelik Dal Kuf Lamed Hey, He says there's a minig of moilim there, mahapach the orla. It's supposed to be a skula for the child. Is that mutter on Shabbos? You're playing with a piece of orla, and the mitzvah was done already. Zok Rav Ozna, if the night behud is matter to put it into the offer because it's part of the ma'isa milah, so being mahapach is also part of the ma'isa milah, and therefore that would be mutter as well. A few more questions about the actual milah itself. The minig always was to give the baby a little wine in the baby's mouth, and typically they used to use fingers, but since COVID everybody's worried, so they started putting a gauze pad into the wine, and then they squeeze a little wine into the baby's mouth. So the baby has that skula, and you don't want to give too much wine, the baby should get sicker, just a drop. Shabbos you can't squeeze, that's חיתוך. So either you could put the pacifier into the wine and put that in the baby's mouth, or you put the actual gauze into the baby's mouth as it is, a little bit of course the tip of it, it gets a little wine. Don't keep it too long, the baby might suck up and get sicker, it's not a good idea. But a little bit wine, but don't be over on חיתוך. The child's needs are at least like a chayla, and you have to try to do everything before Shabbos. You put the medicine onto the gauze, have everything ready. We try to do all achanas before Shabbos, because this again is, when avoidable, one should avoid it. A very painful question, I'll just mention it. Rav Ozna was insistent, he has I think 3 or 4 tshuvas. If you have a milah on Shabbos, and you have an uncle or an aunt or relatives that are not religious, and they're definitely going to drive to the milah, better push it off till Sunday. A zoivite was the Shmira Shabbos. Now most places say, well, I didn't invite them, they're coming. But just to mention, it might be hutra, but it's not hufka. People ask about paying the mohel for a Shabbos Bris. So we once spoke about it, the minig is to pay a mohel, but Shabbos, maybe it's schar Shabbos. So they choose them. First of all, schar Shabbos, we paskin, is mutter. That means you're mechuyev to pay for schar Shabbos. The worker has an issue, maybe it's ein raya siman bracha. So it's his decision to defer taking payment. But as a person hiring a waiter or a chazan or a speaker, whatever it is, you have to pay. The worker has to make a decision. So, but lemaisa, that's why lemaisa you have to pay. Number 2, if he checks the baby before and or after, it makes it a more of a weekday job, and therefore it's mutter. And last but not least, I want to mention this point that the point of drinking the wine. You see, lemaisa by a weekday bris, you drink the wine, the one that gets the bracha, the rashiv, whatever, the rav, whoever gets the brachos. Shabbos, you need a kiddush makam suda. So the Mariel says, give it to a child, which that's the meaning in many places, but it's lav dafka. If the one that made the brachos wants to be yaitz for kiddush, he makes the guffen, drinks a revius, and gets some cake. So it's a kiddush makam suda. Then he can tend the kiddush. If he doesn't want to eat cake, but he wants for some reason to have the wine, he could drink an extra revius, kiddush makam suda. At the end of the day, lemais, we should make simchas. I'll tell you just one more halacha. It's a beautiful skula to pass on. Balio Gutmach in the back of Masechta Shabbos, in Shabbos Kuf Lamed, he based on a pasuk, Hanar Boicha, Kisham Hashem B'Kol Bichi, when the child was crying. He says there's a great skula to daven for whatever one needs when the baby is crying out in pain from the pain of the milah. And he takes the pasuk, Kisham Hashem Tchinasi, Hashem Tvilasi Yikach. That capital Vav is going on the B'Shas Milah. When a child's crying out in pain, it's a skula for tefillos. Is it mutter to say that tefillah on Shabbos? Because we don't have bakashas pratiyos. But all the pais can say, when you have a special shas HaKosher, don't give it up. So we should make simchas and daven. I couldn't talk to you all. Yeah.
Shame you should tell like your biggest character of Smith for today's share. Have the guest is sponsoring a share. Call Ergenshire at Torah 718-851-865. One email ist@yeshivanet.com. What I say every year, for many years, of Shmuel Dishon Shlita would speak for a few minutes about the Moses Yad Yisrael of Karen Stone in Belarus, and it's not available to come, so Yakov Steinman, as Aiden will speak.
Leider Rabbi Dishon is not feeling so well the last few days. He's in the home. Al Caponim, we come every year and we make an appeal for the Moses Yad Yisrael, who's been working in this former Soviet Union for over 35 years. We make Yiddish Kinder. We're learning these weeks the parshas of God, the Shivit Mitzrayim, the Gulas Mitzrayim. It says that all the Golas are nichlun in the Golas of Mitzrayim, and all the Geulas are also nichlun in the Gula from Mitzrayim. It says yes, Mitzrayim, that we saw a little over 35 years ago in the former Soviet Union, the Golas of the communism was given schrecklich. Set euch given, set menashoirisch given, Yiddishkeit like is poshet. We're still seeing the terrible effects of that ad hayoim. But we're waiting for the Lakachte Eschem Lila Om. The Rebbeinu Shem is waiting, poshet, that we should take these Yiddish kinder, these neshomas, and poshet bring them back to Torah mitzvahs. It says poshet apachad, and we see that over the last 35 years we have hundreds and hundreds of mishpochas, Baruch Hashem, that are shomer Torah mitzvahs today, beautiful mishpochas over the ganze Welt. But there are so many more. That are poshet waiting, and with a few dollars we take a child into a camp, into the school, and from there you just have to do that one pu'ula, and from there a little while later they zoicha to make a bris, to make brisen at the age of 10, 15, 20, mamash mesias nefesh, and from there they come to a Jewish school, and they go out and they go into normal Jewish Yiddish communities, and they end up getting married. Born Yiddish Doiris, we have probably thousands of Eineklach today, poshet was gekommen von der Arbeit, was mit getan damals. Ist jeder eine, was will, kann nehmen nach Chelik, poshet wie ein Schutif, und ton von der Eibisches Kinder, wird der Eibische sicher zurückzahlen, kifliche Flying, gesund, nachas und Atzloche. Anybody that's listening from the outside could always call the number 718-438-9399 zum Starter sein und nehmen nach Chelik, und man soll Tage solcher sein, zu der gute Schleime bekorf.
Nein, ich bin der Kasher, was ich gesprochen habe, sage ich, soll ich mit der Mitte schnell mal, und ich hoffe, dass man sieht, wie ich will, der Jader. Alles ora van het aan de nog aan midden zo de komen naar het huis en af van de raster wat daar. En dan gaan we dus maar af en graag en ga je dit dan dit hebben kunnen maar weer aan dan nee. Is maar smaak als alleen al zo dan dan wij mogen ja van alleen wat al zo maar Okay, at least I know it's Sunday, but we're going to be seeking for Bris on Shabbos. Okay? Well, we're going to start there, we're going to start. Okay, shh.
Just what we learned today, Bez Hashem. First of all, the milah on Shabbos is a schus. The child has Yiras Shamayim. The vachnacht typically should be done, at least by the learning and the krishma. The suda, you could be yoitza the food pot with the shalom zacha. Shalom zacha is typically made the second Shabbos. In other words, the Shabbos the night before the milah, not the night when the Shabbos that the baby is born. The milah, like Chilul Shabbos for Chayla, is maybe hutra, but still all the poskim agree it should not be overdone. Whatever can be avoided, it's like hutra with a great concern. It shouldn't be hufka. There is a reluctance that they have two people, one doing the milah, one doing the חיתוך, one doing the pria. Some are more mekel via ben, but there definitely is reluctance. But those that are mekel, there's definitely it's had to be mekel, as we said, because mi'ikidin it's definitely mutter. The ismol is a chasar and kiss. Even let's say a guf mekaymi, it's asa. Even the pouch, the case is a tuffle to the actual keli. The heter to use it for the meal is because a person has a mind to use it, but not across the board. Only what's needed for the milah. So it's sort of in between. It's not muktzah gomer, but it's definitely muktzah for whatever is not part of the actual milah. That's why you're allowed to move it afterwards, to put it away, also to wash it. All these heterim are because it's a in-between muktzah. Is a heter to put it oide biyadai or give it to someone else that's oide biyadai. Again, the same yisoid, until it's in its final resting place, it is still part of the ma'aseh mitzvah. Putting it into a keli that has a valuable item is another eitzah, or seifa b'shum tchilasa, he might lose the use of it. But at the end of the day, it has to be done in a proper way with concern that it's not hutra Shabbos or hutcha and gansin. It's done with a cheshbon. If there's a makam sakani allowed to move the milah knife, that's pashit. The Mishnah Berurah goes with the taz, but he goes with oid biyadai and b'di'eved. Putting it under the baby, many people don't do it on Shabbos. Those that do feel it's part of the milah. The Vaya Ben could appoint without giving over the milah knife, but those that give it over hold that it's still part of the milah. The minig is to wash the izmel afterwards. A disposal izmel, if he's makbid, is taka muktzah. The halacha of taking the milah knife should only be done what's needed for the actual milah knife itself. The orla is muktzah, but it's a mitzvah. Kol zman you don't finish the mitzvah, you're allowed to put it into the offer. Then the offer is moved al machmas graf shel re'i. The wine and the baby, don't forget to avoid schita. The halachis of baby, he needs the refuah, but it should be done whatever is possible before Shabbos. Whatever medical help is needed should be done before Shabbos. The smearing and the opening the wrappers to keep it sterile, of course, make sure to keep it sterile. Paying the mohel is a chiyuv. The mohel has the option not take it, but you have to pay. Someone should drink a little bit of the wine, maybe the baby or the mavarich, and has to drink a revius. And the time of davening is even on Shabbos to daven when the baby's crying. Yes.